Garrett with Cosmic Alchemist Astrology. And if you're tuning into this live, thank you for doing that. Didn't put out any announcements. Really, today I wanted to just kind of play around with this capability. I've never done a live before on YouTube, and I've got a little downtime in my work day, um, doing acupuncture here on a Saturday. So I just thought I'd try it out, see how it goes, and I just wanted to talk about a topic that I'll probably be talking about for a great length into the future, probably for years to come. So I wanted to talk about the savior complex that we all share to some degree here in the Western world. This has been a huge part of the Western world for a long time because the religions that dominate the Western world, so mostly Christianity and Islam, I see the Middle East as sort of part of the Western world. They're kind of at that pivot point between East and West, but Islam made incursions into Europe over the years. And then in Europe, you do have Muslims. Was it Albania, Bosnia, places like that. And Turkey is almost part of Europe. And the thing is, too, Christians and Muslims both hate to admit, but those religions are, they're pretty damn similar. I wouldn't call them practically identical, but they're so similar they can't stand each other. So, and these two religions have savior complexes very strongly in common. I'd say their savior complexes are equal. So, because our culture has been brought up on these religions for the past 1700 years, Christianity became first acceptable in the Roman Empire and then the state religion of the Roman Empire. So the Roman deep state saw that they could use Christianity to their advantage. So at first, Christians were persecuted, then they were tolerated, and then they flipped the script and they said, if you're anything besides a Christian, we're going to kill you. Or at the very least, you're going to get tortured and re-educated, and you'll be on probation for life. So, and one of the reasons I think that the Roman deep state did this was because the early Christians were communists. They held property in common. If you look in Acts, the book of Acts in the New Testament, basically, St. Peter has a couple murdered for not turning over all their property to the church. They sold some land, but they kept some of the money for themselves. And he basically goes off on this whole thing and he says, "You did not withhold money from me, but from God." So there you go. It's communism. So the Roman deep state loved that, and they were like, "Yeah, let's bring that in." People make the argument, well, the Romans paganized it, and it's not the original Christianity. It's like, yeah, well, the original Christianity was, St. Peter's communism and Paul's communism. Stuff's old. So anyway, point is, these religions are the foundations of Western culture as we know it. And they're riddled with savior complexes, messiah complexes, and, martyrdom. And there's a victim mentality woven into it. So what's a savior complex? Basically, a savior complex is when people think that they have the answers for other people. And they think they have a divine duty, or if they're secular, if they're like secular atheists, they think they have a duty, a moral obligation to get people to do what they see as being the best for them. So there's this lurking attitude where they think people who don't agree with them and don't want to speak, think, act, and behave and live like them, they think those people who disagree are too stupid to know what's good for them. And the churches have been doing this to people forever. You know, I grew up Catholic. It's really easy to make fun of the Catholic Church because, they kind of look ridiculous. It's not hard. It's like making fun of them is like beating up a 7-year-old and, thinking you have like fighting prowess, that you're a good fighter. So it's very easy. But then the Protestant churches are all about 95% Catholic because there's no cultural memory of what came before the Catholic Church. So make fun of the Catholics as much as they want. They're still 95% Catholic. Because the Catholic Church taught them everything they knew. Catholic Church had dietary requirements, and they sought to basically regulate people's sex lives. So anybody tells me what to eat and tries to dictate my sexual habits, I don't trust them. I don't trust an institution that wants to do that. So we're riddled through with the savior complex. So savior complex is all about a person thinking that they know what's best for other people. Now, when the people that they want to save don't welcome them with open arms, they can get very angry. These days, basically, people are subject to ridicule. They're subject to ostracism. Ostracism, when somebody ostracizes you, it's when somebody basically writes you off and like runs you out of their life. So that's pretty much the extent of it. People get beat up. It's like what BLM and Antifa and even some right-wing groups do to people that they don't like the looks of. Literally don't like the looks of. You get the wrong skin tone. You're wearing the wrong puppet politician's name on your shirt or your hat or whatever. So, the wrong TV character's name on your apparel. So that's pretty much the extent of it these days. You get shadow banned on social media. You might get your bank account frozen. But in the old days, people with savior complexes would drag you into kangaroo courts. They'd torture you. They humiliate you on a much deeper level than they do now. And then, they might burn you at the stake or execute you in some fashion. And that's another thing about savior complexes that's very important. Humiliation is a huge tool in their arsenal. It's a very powerful weapon in their arsenal. So that's a thing they do when they can't get away. And these days it's tough to get away with visiting people with physical violence for disagreeing with you. But what you can do is you can humiliate them so that it doesn't matter, who the would-be savior is, right wing, left wing, religious, not religious. Since they can't get away with the violence most of the time, they ridicule people. So they pull out oh, these people are so stupid. This person's so stupid. It's like from a shitty game show. It's like the tagline. They're so stupid, So that's the people with the savior complex. They often default to humiliation. This is huge in the family. Especially on my dad's side, watching the news. They're totally programmed. That's an interesting thing. Is my dad's parents were new Americans. Back in the 1930s, and they belonged to two churches, so they did the whole Catholic thing on Sunday, but then on Saturdays, there was another church, and it was the movies. It was going to the theater, and in the old days, before television, you went into the cinema, I should say, rather than theater, the cinema. You had news, you had cartoons, shorts, like little serials, like series, kind of like sitcoms, like 20 minutes a pop. And then there were two feature-length movies. So this was like an all-day affair. This took several hours, probably took 6 hours or something. But people digested that stuff. And, the thing with immigrants is they usually have an inferiority complex right off the bat, unless they arrive in a country with a lot of money where they can basically just buy whatever they want and they're higher up the social ladder. So immigrants have inferiority complexes. So these, especially these grandparents, they learned a lot of English going to the cinema, listening to the radio. So having an inferiority complex, which again, most immigrants do, you want to absorb as much of the culture as possible, and you want to get into conformity with it because of these religions, again, these Messiah complex religions, these Savior complex religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism to a lesser degree. The Judaism doesn't recruit people. They don't really want outsiders. They're very insular. They're an exclusive book club. They're a book club just like Christianity and Islam, but they're very exclusive. You can convert if you marry someone, but it's a big hassle. But Christianity and Islam, for many years, recruited with the threat of death. And this history is lost to a lot of the newfangled, Protestant churches, especially in America. They believe that Christianity became the leading religion in the Western world because it was just so self-obvious. It was so self-evident how good it was. And, and they talk about, well, you should protect the weak and blah, 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 and be a good person. So, which I agree with. But they just think it became the leading religion because people could just see how amazing and good it was. Well, it's not true. The priests and bishops had military forces at their disposal to attack people who refused to convert to it. So there can be there can be a very dark dimension when it comes to savior complexes. Now, for people who believe that religions only have savior complexes, well, the secular people do this too, the non-religious people. And this is what, the last 2.5 years has been all about with the Jabberwocky. Jabberwocky. You get me? Jabberwocky. That's what this has been all about, where we've been very strongly invited to become medical experiments. It's a savior complex. And you have would-be saviors on both sides. So you have people on the pro-Jabberwocky side who they want to ridicule and scream at anyone who doesn't want the Jabberwocky. And then the anti-Jabberwocky people are like, they're almost kind of, well, not all of them, but there's a contingent that are basically kind of laughing when people get sick from the Jabberwocky, and they're like, well, dumbass, you were too stupid to know what was best for you. So it's on both sides because of this religious history. Everybody's a savior and everybody knows what's best for everyone. And this is a big part of the whole, the American empire. Not just the American empire, but, you know, the Christian Roman Empire, once it went Christian, and then the British Empire before the American Empire. And, and even the Crusades before the British Empire. It's all about people knowing what's best for other people. So these empires would go to foreign countries and they'd say, we have the correct religion and governmental system for you. And that was people's, in their minds, in the savior's minds, it's the cue for the people on the receiving end to just accept whatever the savior thinks is best for them. And when people who the savior thinks they're saving doesn't want to do things their way, they get very angry. So, the American empire is really running amok right now. Once Barack Obama got elected, people basically, they either forgot about what the American empire was doing or they're in denial about it. It's like the whole peace movement went away when Barack Obama took office, but there was still all these ridiculous wars going on. So now the American empire, it's basically done a bunch of Indian giving. So it's broken so many treaties that NATO made with Russia, since the days of the 90s, especially the Belgrade Agreement. In 1995, when President Clinton promised the leader of Russia, I think it was Boris Yeltsin at the time, that NATO would not expand east anymore. Well, then NATO, which is a puppet of the American empire, and even, the US military and government are puppets of giant commercial and financial interests. So they've been encircling Russia with bases. So, they keep bringing all these Eastern European countries, like Poland, into NATO in order to encircle it. And the Russians are getting pissed off. If Russia put bases in Canada and Mexico, we'd be pooping our pants and screaming about it. So basically the saviors here in the Western world, in America and in NATO, think they know what's best for Russia. And it's basically what's going on right now is the Nazis want to finish the job on Russia that they started in 1941. So in 1941, you had Operation Barbarossa, which was the Third Reich's invasion of the Soviet Union. Didn't work out. But now you've got, German fascist banker like Klaus Schwab running the World Economic Forum, and which was put together by this banking cartel, which owns all the governments in the West. So they're trying to finish the job that Hitler started in 1941. And it's pretty insane. They're going to fail again, but they're going to try. But, these people think they're good people and they think they're doing what's best for everyone. And it's because they're saviors. And really, in my opinion, people appoint themselves as saviors to others because they have a lot of self-loathing. So they basically hate themselves and they're ashamed of themselves. So they think if they go save other people, that they're going to redeem themselves in the eyes of who the fuck ever, their older siblings, their parents, their church, the sadistic God of the Bible. Like, I don't know, but they think they're going to redeem themselves in somebody's eyes and, and perhaps even in their own eyes. But it's never enough. Self-appointed saviors and messiahs never get enough. They always want to take more. They always want to convert more people. So it's an interesting state of affairs, and I think people are slowly waking up to it. But, I've lived this myself. When you look at how people behave, depending on where you are in your family, amongst your siblings, are you oldest, youngest, middle? If you're in a big family, are there a few, children in the middle? And, those dynamics, everybody works a different way, and people will say, oldest kids suck, middle kids suck. I don't like younger ones. I don't like only children. They're such pains in the ass. Well, really, in a family, everybody's a pain in the ass in some way. It's just about what type of a pain in the ass are you? And then within the family, people whose pain in the assness is similar to one another, they kind of form cliques and they like each other. When different people's forms, their individual forms of being a pain in the ass, are incompatible, that's when they don't like each other. So, being the oldest in my family, I caught myself taking on, the savior complex, where you think you know what's best for, your younger siblings. And, I can remember my parents, their older siblings, doing the same thing, especially on my dad's side, pretty intensely so. Not all of them, but, definitely one acting that way, and I thought being, condescending. But this is just, if you don't live your own life and decide who you're going to be, you're going to slip into patterns that have been in your family for generations. So I found myself doing this and, thinking I knew what was best simply because I was older. So yeah, I basically woke up one day and, realized I was an asshole on different levels. So yeah. Yeah, being a savior, it's basically you're always offering unsolicited advice, which is abusive in a very mild way. Can be severe, depends how people take it and how it's delivered over course of time. And God, I'm losing my train of thought here about that. Yeah, unsolicited advice is, by nature, it's abusive because you're trying to impose your will on another person and you're trying to convince them you're more clever, or you're trying to use some moral approach where you're a bad person if you don't do what I say. Um, it's it's bad juju to superimpose your will over other people's, and it actually snaps back on you. There's a backlash. You either find yourself alone, or people will find ways to put you through hell, to seriously inconvenience you. And they do it unconsciously. They don't know they're doing it. They don't know they're inconveniencing you. But they will do things that make your life difficult because they're basically like lashing out on having like their individual will kind of crushed because you think you can save them and offer them a better way. This is everywhere. This is in politics. This is in religion and families, academia. The world's just full of it. And it's because people have terrible boundaries. Boundaries, it's realizing where you end and where another person begins. And if you don't have boundaries, you're just up in everyone's shit. You're all up in their business. You don't know the difference between your business and their business. And they're probably up in yours too. So it's going to be a big part of rebuilding the world, of changing the world, is understanding boundaries and recognizing where we end and the other person begins, the other people begin. So, yeah, they're just the savior complex is fascinating because people just they don't know they're being assholes, but they're offering advice that was not solicited, that was not invited. And on a personal level, they're like, you know what you should do? You know what would be great? You should do da 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 because the rest of us do blah, 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 blah. It's like it goes something like that. And or a thing people say is, how could you think that? That's a big one I've been hearing, since I can remember. How could you think that? Well, it's none of your fucking business what I think. I have a right to think it. And these same people often will hide behind, free speech on the one hand, or they'll hide behind progressivism and liberalism. So it's on both sides. So, yeah, we got to ditch the savior complex or we're going to screw ourselves. I think especially the American empire, the military ass whooping is coming because the savior complex is just so out of control, so run amok, and it's so unconscious. Don't even know we're doing it. So it's going to get interesting what becomes of it all. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm under 30 minutes. Just wanted to do a little spouting off to decompress today, but yeah, mind the savior complex. It's a big takeaway from this. I've done it. I know how it goes. So anyway, have a nice one. I'll be seeing you. And get ready for October. That's gonna be 2022 is gonna start in October. I'll have that video out in the next several days. Take it easy.